Do internet social media platforms influence our political views and attitudes? Do they create echo chambers and filter bubbles that isolate us from opposing perspectives and make us more extreme and hostile towards the other side? Or do they expose us to a diversity of information and opinions that can challenge our biases and make us more moderate and tolerant? Hello and welcome to Curiosity, where we explore fascinating and interesting topics about everything. Today, we are going to talk about a question that has been on many people's minds. Does social media polarize voters? Social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram have become an integral part of our lives. We use them to communicate with friends and family, to share our opinions and interests, and to get informed about what is happening in the world. Does social media polarize voters? It is not easy questions to answer, as there are many factors that affect how we form and express our political preferences. However, in recent years, there has been a growing body of research that tries to shed some light on the relationship between social media and political polarization. In this episode, we will review some of the most important and relevant studies on this topic, and discuss their implications for our democracy and society. Let's start with the definition of polarization. Polarization can be understood as the degree of disagreement or conflict between different groups or individuals on political issues, values, or identities. There are different types of polarization, such as affective polarization, which refers to how much we like or dislike people who belong to different political parties. Opinion polarization, which refers to how far apart our views are from those of the other party. And behavioral polarization, which refers to how much we act on our political preferences, such as voting, donating, or protesting. Polarization is not necessarily a bad thing, as it can reflect genuine differences in beliefs and preferences among citizens. However, when polarization becomes too extreme or intense, it can undermine the quality of democracy and the functioning of society. For example, high levels of polarization can reduce trust and cooperation among citizens, increase intolerance and discrimination against minorities, hamper the ability of governments to solve problems and implement policies, and even lead to violence and civil unrest. So how does social media affect polarization? One common argument is that social media platforms use algorithms that filter the content we see on our feeds based on our preferences and behaviors. These algorithms are designed to maximize user engagement and satisfaction, but they may also create filter bubbles that limit our exposure to diverse or challenging information. As a result, we may end up seeing more content that confirms our existing views and opinions, while ignoring or dismissing content that contradicts or questions them. This may reinforce our biases and make us more confident and extreme in our beliefs. Another common argument is that social media platforms create echo chambers that amplify the voices of like-minded people who share our political views. These platforms allow us to connect with others who have similar interests and values, but they may also isolate us from those who have different perspectives and experiences. As a result, we may end up hearing more arguments that support our positions and opinions, while avoiding or rejecting arguments that challenge or criticize them. This may increase our attachment to our own group and make us more hostile and negative towards the other group. These arguments seem plausible and intuitive, but are they supported by empirical evidence? To answer this question, we need to look at some of the studies that have tried to measure the effects of social media on polarization. One way to do this is to compare the levels of polarization among social media users and non-users, or among users who use different platforms or features. Another way is to conduct experiments that manipulate the content or algorithms of social media platforms, and observe how they affect users' attitudes and behaviors. One of the most comprehensive studies on this topic was conducted by a team of researchers from Meta, the company that owns Facebook and Instagram, and independent academics in 2020. The study involved hundreds of thousands of Facebook and Instagram users who agreed to participate in a survey before and after the U.S. presidential election. The researchers also randomly assigned some of the participants to different groups that received different versions of their news feeds. For example, some participants saw less content from like-minded sources. Some saw less re-shared content. Some saw content in reverse chronological order, and some saw no changes at all. The results of this study were published in 4 papers in Nature and Science in 2023. The main finding was that none of the changes to the newsfeed algorithm had any effect on affective or opinion polarization among the participants. In other words, reducing exposure to like-minded content did not make users more moderate or tolerant, nor did increasing exposure to diverse content make them more extreme or hostile. The researchers concluded that social media platforms do not create polarization, but rather reflect it. Another important study on this topic was conducted by a team of researchers from Stanford University in 2019. The study involved nearly 3,000 Facebook users who agreed to deactivate their accounts for 4 weeks before the U.S. midterm elections. The researchers also randomly assigned some of the participants to a control group that continued to use Facebook as usual. The researchers then measured the effects of Facebook deactivation on various outcomes, such as political knowledge, attitudes, behaviors, and well-being. The results of this study were published in the American Economic Review in 2020. The main finding was that deactivating Facebook reduced the amount of news that users consumed, especially from sources that are known to be biased or untrustworthy. However, deactivating Facebook also had little or no effect on users' political polarization, as measured by their views on various issues and candidates. The researchers concluded that Facebook does not cause polarization, but rather mediates it. These 2 studies are not the only ones that have examined the effects of social media on polarization, but they are among the most rigorous and large-scale ones. They suggest that social media platforms are not the main drivers of polarization in society, but rather reflect the existing divisions and preferences of users. They also suggest that changing the content or algorithms of social media platforms may not be enough to reduce polarization, as users may have other sources of information or influence that shape their political views and attitudes. However, this does not mean that social media platforms have no role or responsibility in addressing polarization. There are still many ways that social media platforms can affect polarization, either positively or negatively, depending on how they are designed and used. For example, social media platforms can affect polarization as follows. Providing accurate and reliable information that can inform and educate users about political issues and events. Promoting civil and constructive dialogue that can foster mutual understanding and respect among users with different views and backgrounds. Encouraging positive and meaningful interactions that can enhance social capital and trust among users with common interests and values. Moderating harmful and hateful content that can incite violence and discrimination against users with different views and identities. Supporting civic engagement and participation that can empower users to voice their opinions and influence political outcomes. These are some of the potential ways that social media platforms can reduce polarization, or at least mitigate its negative consequences. However, these are not easy tasks, as they require careful balancing of competing values and interests, such as freedom of expression, privacy, security, diversity, and accountability. They also require collaboration and coordination among various stakeholders, such as platform owners, regulators, researchers, civil society groups, and users themselves. In conclusion, social media platforms do not create polarization, but rather reflect it. And changing the content or algorithms of social media platforms may not reduce polarization, but rather mediate it. We have also learned that social media platforms have a role and responsibility in addressing polarization, but that they face many challenges and trade-offs in doing so. That's all for today's episode. Thank you for watching Curiosity. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. And don't forget to share your thoughts and questions in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious.